Thank you for joining William Steele True Crime and Steele a Spotlight Television. This is William Steele with a very, very special guest this evening. We have Rosario Chico. Chico, excuse me, is a heartbroken mother going through a huge battle in Tulsa, Oklahoma, regarding her children and her ex. And she just scored a major victory in the Oklahoma Supreme Court today. I'm going to say hello to her and let her introduce herself and her background a little bit, and we're going to go into this case. Very, very compelling case of alleged child abuse.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. It's so great to see someone like you that has the history that you do, that you yourself went through the system, and that you're now really giving people a platform to be able to speak, and you're
Thank
advocating
you.
for victims as well as people who have gone through the system, because regardless of if someone does something wrong or not, I think that we can all agree that some of the parts of the system are broken and not followed. And so it's great to have someone like you that has already gone through the system now give a voice to a lot of people like me and other victims or other people that have faced the system.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're watching some of the material we're putting out. We're on Rumble under official William Steele, and on YouTube, William Steele True Crime and Steele Spotlight Television. And so, my reality show is Inmate to Roommate. That's on A&E Network, and season 2 is about to drop. Second highest rated reality show in the country when it was airing about a year and a half ago. Anyway, let's get into a little bit of your background. So I want my audience to know that we're talking to somebody who's, poised and articulate, and she can very well explain things herself. She was run into the ground legally and is now representing herself pro se and prevailed in the Supreme Court. Tell us a little bit about your background first and what led up to this moment.
Yeah. So I am a TV producer. I worked for the First 48. It's a true crime homicide TV show. And I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma to work for it. It was my first TV producer official title show. And so I thought that I was going to be in Oklahoma temporarily to work that show, because a lot of the shows that we work on are, freelance, and they just don't take very long to do, or it just kind of depends on whether they're going to be renewed season by season, if you're going to be in the same state or city. And I
Interestingly, Inmate to Roommate airs on the same network, A&E. So we both work for A&E. I still work for A&E. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, and I ended up, I got DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. I grew up undocumented. I crossed the border as a child, and there was a executive order from the president at the time that allowed children that had crossed, no fault of their own, went to college, did everything that they could lawfully. And so at the time, I got DACA, and that's how I was able to work as a TV producer. And I was in a marriage that was abusive. And throughout most of the marriage, I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have my own bank account. I didn't feel like I could really survive out of the marriage. Whenever I got DACA, I felt a little bit more independent because I was able to drive, have a bank account, be able to work, and be able to independently take care of my children if I needed to. And so things got really bad. My ex always struggled with substance abuse issues, and there was domestic violence. And so I actually I got hired by the showrunner of the First 48 to do a sizzle reel. And we went to go film at a women's maximum security prison in Oklahoma. And I was the shooter producer there, and I was there to film about these women graduating from this program that was like cosmetology, their hair, makeup. And I ran into this woman and filmed this woman named Tony Hall. And Tony Hall had been convicted of failure to protect. And I learned through her that the person her partner who did physically abuse the children, he got about 2 years in jail, just a slap on the wrist, while she was convicted to 33 years in jail. And she was a domestic violence victim. I don't even think that she was really there when it happened. She was at work, but still she was convicted and punished far greater for failure to protect. And so whenever she had this graduation, her children were there at this graduation, and it was the most dignified setting that they had ever seen her in. It was more a gym setting, cake, decorations. They could freely hug her, and they were towering over her. And her children are crying, she's crying, and I'm behind the camera crying. And I just think to myself, my God, this is the story that the world needs to see. And
I'm sorry, what was her name again?
Tony Hall.
Tony Hall. Okay.
Tony Hall.
But she's still incarcerated.
She is not. She was pardoned by Governor Stitt.
Very good.
The ACLU helped her, and I actually reconnected with her after me dealing with a lot of this. But me witnessing her in jail, well, in prison, that was my example that if you don't report, if you don't call law enforcement, you will get held accountable, even if you're not the abuser, even if you're not the domestic violence abuser. And so about a week.
So basically in your state, everybody's a mandatory reporter, because some states it's only, certain categories of people that are mandatory. But I look at it like this way: crime against a child, everybody's a mandatory reporter.
Yeah. In the state of Oklahoma, everybody's a mandatory reporter, not just professionals or medical professionals or teachers or everybody in the state of Oklahoma is a mandated reporter. And so from meeting her about a week and a half, 2 weeks at the most later, there was a domestic violence incident that occurred in my home by my ex against me and one of our baby. And so I called law enforcement for the first time. And I think had I not had Tony Hall as that example, I don't know that I would have ever called. But just seeing her children longing to be with her longing to be with her children. And, I think a lot of the times when you're not the one hitting your children and you're not the one being the aggressor in a relationship, you don't think that something's going to happen to you. But she was my example that you can be separated from your children if you don't pick up the phone and call or report.
Right.
And
well, that's a good testament to her sharing her story with people, and maybe she can welcome to be a guest on this show. And so now I think I'm going to let you continue, but because I know a little bit about your story, it looks like you reporting all these things sort of snowballed and backfired on you because of his connections, his pull, his money, his attorneys, his family. Am I correct, basically?
Yeah. So I thought I was doing the right thing for the first time in contacting law enforcement. And I didn't want to. I was terrified and scared. But it turns out in the state of Oklahoma, I'm facing a catch-22 where if you don't report, you can go to jail up to 33 years, actually up to 99 years. I believe we would have to check the law exactly on that. But if for a failure to protect, you can face many decades in jail or in prison. But, in my case, I protected my children, and I was scared to report many times. I only contacted Child Protective Services 2 times before my children ended up being given away in a guardianship to paternal grandmother. But it's just, I've definitely have experienced a catch-22 that whenever you do try to do the right thing, and if the other person has more income, more influence, more political pull, then that person isn't prosecuted. And then
there's definitely a two-tier justice system in this country. I wrote a book about Robert Durst, and the family of Kathy Durst, who he murdered, his first wife, for 40 years screamed out for justice, but his family's worth, excess of $1 billion. He had $100 million, and he was able to hold off authorities for years. until he finally got charged a few years ago in California with murdering a mutual friend of ours, Susan Berman. So with his money and his family connections, he was able to hold off justice for almost 40 years. So I see how this happens all the time.
Yeah. And, I had a criminal law attorney that would ask whenever we had meetings, he would say, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And, I still was maybe, I understood everything that was happening, and, that influence does have a great um, weight with justice. But at the time, whenever my attorney was saying that, I didn't quite understand that. And he very much had an understanding that, if you're a trust fund baby, or if you're very connected, typically you don't face consequences legally whenever you do commit child abuse or some sort of domestic violence, or you're very well protected if your family's very well connected.
Right. I'm listening. I just got distracted for a second. Good.
Oh, it's okay. So, I'm right now facing child stealing criminal charges. I was arrested at a domestic violence shelter, and my children were with me whenever I was arrested. And at the time that I was arrested, and even to now, there's still a protective order against my ex. And that protective order, we are in a guardianship right now because he sent his mother to go get guardianship of the children.
Right.
And that protective order is essentially frozen in family court until we can get back to family court. But what really brought up the child stealing charges and me being at a domestic violence shelter is my children had been repeatedly disclosing child abuse by him, and had marks and bruises, and they had I think it was 3 doctors that diagnosed suspected child physical abuse. Child Protective Services got involved, and they contacted me and told me that they had audited my children's investigations, and I audio recorded them, and they told me that they had violated the policy in some of those investigations, and that the outcome shouldn't have been the outcome. So they opened up a new
The history of the abuse disclosures with your children. Who were the disclosures originally made to?
They were made to a teacher before. They've been made to my mom. I know that they've been made to a doctor. They've been made to forensic interviewers.
They were directly accusing your ex of being the person responsible.
Yes. Yeah. So like one time, and I was actually in Austin filming for my 600-pound life. I wasn't even in town. And I got a call from a school counselor, and she left me a voicemail. Then I called her back, and my little guy had bruises on his chins, on his legs. And he said that his dad had kicked him. And while he talked to that counselor, he also told on a kid that was bullying him at the time. And so, it was instances like this where other people would call DHS, and we have a guardian ad litem, and a guardian ad litem is a private attorney. She wasn't chosen randomly. She was selected by attorneys. And this guardian ad litem has been an advocate for dad.
Is that the woman? I think her name is Welch, something like that.
Yeah, Catherine Welch.
Now I want to clarify for for the platforms and for my fans and for legal reasons. Obviously, we're not going to name the name of any minors here, and everything we're discussing has been brought up in criminal complaints as well as in litigation in courts. So this is public record material, and we're not disclosing the name of any underage victims or anything like this or alleged victims. This is Rosario's experience with the criminal justice system and being what she believes is treated very unfairly. And my observation seems to be the same. It's hasn't been fair in this regard. I do know one thing that we spotted. I think was mentioned by yourself or one of your advocates that your ex still has a pending unresolved domestic violence case against him that you filed, I guess.
he has a protective order against him,
Protective order.
and
Okay.
that has child abuse allegations, it has substance abuse allegations, it has domestic violence. So it really kind of addresses all of the safety issues, and it's still pending to this day. It hasn't been addressed. Dad and his attorney waived their ability to have it heard statutorily, and it's really frozen in the family court case, but still active. And so
Weren't there professionals that these things were disclosed to that had an obligation to report, and because they didn't, in your state, it constitutes a felony?
yeah, it does. And my children have disclosed. I filed a federal lawsuit, and it's still pending at this time against the guardian ad litem who received disclosures, and against a court-appointed therapist that the guardian ad litem recommended to be appointed to the case. That therapist testified on the stand that my little guy, my oldest, I say little guy, but my oldest disclosed abuse 11 of 12 sessions.
Wow.
And I didn't know at the time that had occurred. It was many months later that she got on the stand and testified to that. She tried to keep me.
You just dropped off the camera. Are you there? Hello? You just dropped off the screen. Mary? She just dropped off. Do I have to send her another link or something? I can't see you or hear you. I don't know if you hit something on your phone or something, or a call came in. Are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Now I see you're back. What happened?
I think I got a call and I ignored it, and then it like blocked off everything.
Okay, so I'll mark where we were, and I'll try to edit that piece out.
Okay. So this therapist, I had signed a contract, and it allowed for me or my attorneys to be able to subpoena the records, and she forged the contract, and I have the original contract, and she scratched off subpoena, and she emailed the attorneys and the guardian ad litem and presented us the original and said, look what your client sent. And I knew I had the original, so I went to go find the original, and I pay attention to very small details, and I knew that had not been scratched off, and she put it only with her initials, but she was trying to block me from getting to the records. And so it took a long time to know. I had no clue that she had received those disclosures. Most of the time it was my ex who was taking the children to her, and she didn't have permission to be able to see any of my other children. It was only my oldest child that the court order was for. And she also lied on the stand that she had obtained the signature of both parents to be able to see all the children. And I have the original contract, and that's not the case. I tried to get it prosecuted. I tried to get the forged contract prosecuted, and of course, that didn't happen. And so it's just, but of course, if I were to forge a contract, immediately I would have criminal charges against me. So it's very difficult when you have attorneys, courts of the friends of the court doing something. They,
what I noticed in even other cases, when there's a guardian ad litem involved who's too close to the judge or the other lawyers, they could just ramble on and say anything. And if you put concrete evidence to the contrary that they're lying or fabricating, they just dismiss it. They give them way too much latitude and authority in the case. We're dealing with something like that, where we are right now. And it's just a shame. So it happened in your case also.
Yeah, and what's so sad is it's a nationwide issue. I mean, ever
Exactly.
since this happened to me, and me being an investigative producer and working true crime TV, like I've had so many families contact me just across the nation, and so many are having issues where evidence and facts are just ignored by the courts, by the professionals, and it's just whatever the narrative that they need to be, whoever is the highest bidder in these custody cases.
Guardianship cases all over the country are the same way. The guardianship cases are very much like that. There's been exposés about that. One's called the Guardians, the criminal courts, even the civil courts in California, especially in Fresno, the number one corrupt. We're doing many cases out of Fresno where the corruption is just endemic, and the courts just listen to the higher bidder or their corrupt attorney friends, and people get murdered left and right. They go to the FBI against the corrupt police, and next thing you know, they're viciously targeted by the police. When it's supposed to be confidential or investigated, nothing happens. So we see this in many other jurisdictions. This whole thing with Tulsa, we started looking into it, and it seems like, and I know you're still there, but from what I hear, it's got its own issues of endemic corruption there as well.
Yeah. Well, with the Guardian ad litem, at the beginning, I couldn't quite figure it out, and obviously I knew she was biased, but I knew that it was very difficult to prove being biased, right? Or prove bias. And so I thought I can't be the only one. And showing a pattern is the only way that I can fight this. And so
Exactly.
I started investigating, and soon enough, I found 4 cases where, with the exact same opposing counsel, she had recommended sole custody. And I found all those cases. I interviewed them, I reviewed their materials, and they were not appropriate recommendations at all. And just, filled with violations of statutes that violate the Guardian ad litem statutes. And whenever my kiddo, so in 2019, there was a criminal case and it ended up getting dismissed, but the ADA, assistant district attorney, told me that I could go ahead and go to my training, that it was going to get continued, and then they ended up dismissing it. But while it was pending, they did an Allen discovery hearing, and there was evidence of child abuse. And the DA called Child Protective Services, the assistant district attorney. And I told him, I said, please don't call. I'm going to get in trouble. This is going to be used against me. And
Right.
he said, I have to call. The Guardian ad litem is not doing her job. I have to report this. I'm a mandated reporter. And I begged, really, don't call. It's going to hurt me. And the Guardian ad litem had been screening out calls whenever someone called regarding my children. She was an attorney for DHS before, which is Child Protective Services, but she worked like the adult division, Adult Protective Services. And she was managing to screen out some of these calls. And whenever the assistant district attorney called, it bypassed the screening out, and my children were forensically interviewed. And that was the very first time that my little girl disclosed sexual abuse. She was 3, almost 4, and it turned my whole world upside down since that moment. And I mean, I just remember even arguing with DHS, like, how do you know this? Why are you saying this? How do you know this? And they told me they were going to do a medical exam. They ended up not doing a medical exam. I didn't know the process at this point, but they stopped the visitation. And then within 2 days, we had an emergency. We had a safety plan meeting, a child safety meeting. And the supervisor there said that they were no longer going to investigate. After 2 days, they were going to close down the investigation. They weren't going to do anything. And this direct supervisor, and I'll name her Laura Sumwalt, her husband worked with my husband in the same hospital, and they were friends. And they didn't disclose this conflict of interest to anybody. She should have told her district director. She should have just pulled herself from the investigation. It's very severe disclosures, I think, for anyone who knows someone to be
Didn't
involved with the case.
didn't the guardian ad litem have some kind of conflict or previous? She was counsel for DHS.
Yeah, so yeah, she was counsel for the Department of Human Services, and with that, I mean, she showed up to that child safety meeting and advocated for the father, and between her and that supervisor, they stopped the investigation, and they didn't protect.
Which is
And
contrary to the evidence that there actually was abuse in the interviews.
yeah, and they
Now, what I know, I read something where you have a federal lawsuit pending against her. Is that still the case? That's still
yeah,
going on?
it's against the guardian ad litem,
Yeah,
Catherine
you can
Welch.
name her here then, and we'll put links in the description to all these documents to show YouTube and my fans and the people that are watching this, supporters and other advocates, that you do have the documents to back up what you're saying.
Yeah,
What's the name of the guardian ad litem that's
uh,
putting
Catherine Welch.
Catherine Wells? So we'll put that in the description as well.
Okay. And but so get this. So whenever this happened, I mean, just turned my whole world upside down. I was vomiting all week. I mean, it was just, I knew child abuse. Like, I knew physical abuse had occurred. My little guy had disclosed it. There had been marks and bruises. Like, I knew that. But to hear child sexual abuse, that's on a complete different level, that I do not wish that on anybody ever, to have to hear that. And I just couldn't understand what had occurred, and that they could tell me that, and then 2 days later just say, "We're not doing anything. We're
Because
not
the guardian
invest."
ad litem and the attorneys are all part of the system. They're being, paid with this guy's money or family money. Same thing went on in Fresno. They had a massive corruption for decades. My fiance, Dr. Mary Bass, exposed a lot of it, built a prosecutable RICO case. And every time you try to go to higher authorities, you get more retaliation,
Mhm.
to the point where people are dying, being imprisoned, or having to flee. And that's exactly what they want. Um, so I know I was going to ask you, I think at one point, and I found this, right. So at one point or now even, do you have any kind of gag orders or anything like that? I believe this is from one of your actual website.
Mhm. There isn't a gag order. They claim that the guardianship is confidential, um, but I wasn't served with the guardianship, um filing, like with the petition. I wasn't served with that. So there's months that are lapsing. There's information that I got that wasn't through the guardianship. There's a lot of investigating that I've done independently. I've never been presented with a court order, a law, something that states that I can't speak about something. And the thing about it is that they turned what they say is a confidential matter, and that only applies to a guardianship. They say that it's confidential, but they themselves turned a guardianship into a criminal matter whenever they filed for the child stealing charges. So all of these filings from the guardianship and evidence from the guardianship has made it into the criminal case,
Right.
and criminal cases are public record, and so they really can't have it both ways as to trying to silence me. You can't claim it's a confidential matter and at the same time want to criminally prosecute me.
Put it into
And
the public domain in such a way. So I
mhm,
think the only thing that has to remain confidential, which rightfully so, is the innocent, victims' names. Um, so you have that pending. Now, I know there was some accusations of parental alienation because that's sort of their go-to. Here you are, in my opinion, and from what you filed, trying to be protective of your children, and in that action are getting accused of different things: child stealing and parental alienation.
yeah, so um you know I've done a lot of work on my case, timeline after timeline, different types of timelines. I've done a timeline as to when was this term parental alienation first brought up, and it was brought up in August of 2018, almost a month after the guardian ad litem got appointed to the case. And then dad, in his discovery response back in 2018, dad already knew that this guardian ad litem was going to give her recommendation of parental alienation. And it's in his discovery back in 2018. So dad and his attorney already knew what was coming down the pipeline, yet there was evidence of substance abuse recordings. There was a recording of dad taking 2 bottles of cough medicine and 40 Robitussin pills in one sitting, him admitting substance abuse, evidence of patient abuse. He would use the largest gauge needle catheters on patients that he didn't like, that are supposed to be used for trauma. If you're in a car wreck, it's going to be the last thing that hurts, if you use because they have to pump in fluid, blood.
That's been entered into the public record also?
Yeah, it's been in the
And
family court
these are
case.
allegations. I don't know what the status of these are, but these are allegations that are going on. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
and
I don't think you've named your ex yet here, but his name I think is all over your documents.
yeah, and I haven't named him, but all of this has been reported to the governor, the AG, the FBI,
Mhm.
the assistant district attorneys, to the district attorney, and Homeland Security. We've contacted the U.S. attorney. I
I
mean,
heard, I
there.
heard, I heard, I heard it's been reported possibly within the legal things that not only the things you just mentioned, but something about cutting.
Yeah, so he would, one of his forms of abuse is he would threaten that he was going to kill himself. And
Mm.
so he would cut himself with knives, and it was the way that I wouldn't leave him and be scared of leaving him. And he has scars on his legs. I think all it would take would be a medical exam. There's 2 scars on his thighs, but he admitted it on the stand. He minimized it. He minimized substance abuse, minimized the cutting, but nonetheless, it occurred whenever he was an adult. Um,
At no stage did he try to get help and reconcile and meet you in the middle and say, "Look, I'm getting help for my issues. I want to see my kids. I didn't molest them or whatever you're accusing me of." Um, or you way past that stage where there's like no hope and he basically needs to be incarcerated and charged. It sounds like he does.
Whenever you're in a domestic violence relationship, there was always promises of, gonna go to rehab, gonna get counseling, gonna get substance abuse help, and that never happened. And whenever I
Were you willing to go with him? Or you were like a holdout and saying, "No, it's your problem. I'm not going. You go."
no, at the time I was willing to, and I think a big mistake, and I think abusers tend to isolate their victims, and then I think people who abuse substances can be manipulative. Like, I wish I would have let his family know sooner, um, before all of this was happening, and he kept me from it because he said he was already the black sheep, that his family had already done this and this and that, and he kind of pitted me against them, and them against me. We didn't have a volatile relationship, we didn't like fight and so on, but um there was a divide, and so I never went to them for help or to let them know.
You think in hindsight that there might be actually rational people who might have tried to help you through this instead
I
of now it's gone too far and he's been exposed for what he's
Mhm.
allegedly done, and now there's no way to back out for them to even say. I would think if they're normal, rational, decent people over there, the parents, they should sit him down and say, enough is enough. Resolve this one way or the other.
Mhm.
Get into counseling, take your medicine for what you did. But maybe they're just afraid they'll never see the kids again because in the end, it seems like they may be protecting him, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, with grandma, I did tell her whenever we were still married, when I was pregnant with my last child, like I told her about substance abuse, that he was abusing, Benadryl, cough medicine, so on. And sadly, I do think they have enabled him a lot. And it wasn't addressed, but I did tell her. I mean, I knew the marriage. I mean, I always kind of knew that, this wasn't a healthy marriage for me to be in, but I just tried many times for a resolution. And even whenever I did tell his mom, nothing happened regarding it.
Are you allowed to say, and only if it's really public record already? Was he on like any kind of psychiatric medications or anything else that was influencing his behavior, or he was trying at some level to get help for his addiction or his problems?
No, no, to my knowledge, and whenever I was married to him, I was still married. It's been almost 6 years, and we've never gone to mediation. This is almost like a brand new case, yet hundreds of thousands of dollars later, which that in itself tells you there's something wrong. That if an attorney that gets paid $400 to $450 an hour and is supposed to be one of the best ones can't wrap up a case before 6 years, then there's something wrong. Like, I don't think that there really is a desire to end the case. I think there's a desire to continue to make a profit off the case.
So he has way more resources than you do at the moment. At one point, you actually had private attorney or attorneys. What happened? Did they just bail on you? What happened with these attorneys?
I spent a lot of money on attorneys, and what I found is, like, I didn't receive true advocacy from my attorneys. The first attorney that I had, the supervisor that was supposed to be supervising my ex, I come to find out that she's a client of my ex's attorney, and she was lying. Dad would show up late and she wouldn't report it, and by late I mean like 35 minutes late. And typically you would just stop the visitation, if someone doesn't show up within 15-20 minutes. And I was actually sending college students to supervise the supervisor. And so from the very beginning, there were very things that were wrong. I had an attorney who, whenever we were supposed to have hearings, instead they would try to do backdoor deals, and they would back me up against the corner and just, intimidate me, and that if we went before the judge, it was going to be worse.
So they would have they would have ex parte communication. I know the other side did. There was a gentleman named Humphreys, I think, that wrote the letter for you.
Yeah.
And I forget his title, but it was something.
Yeah. So, Oklahoma state legislator, he's a state representative, Justin Humphrey. He's also,
I think he made a phenomenal letter for you, a phenomenal pitch. So shout out for him.
He's very brave. He calls corruption for what it is, and he, writes letters often to the AG, to the governor. He's kind of the go-to guy in Oklahoma, that if people are facing, anything inside the prison system, any sort of abuse of power, violation.
May I ask if he's Republican or Democrat?
He's Republican.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah.
And give me his full name and title again. Maybe we'll have him as a guest over here one day.
Oh, yeah, I think he would be great. It's Justin Humphrey.
All right, and Mr. Humphrey, thank you for your advocacy for everybody who needs it. I was incarcerated a long time for nonviolent crimes, and there wasn't anybody in politics you could write who would write you back when I was doing time. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I just, like, I went to go work for Child Protective Services. Like, after my child disclosed sexual abuse, and they did nothing. I
heard rumor of that, but I wasn't going to bring it up unless you did. So here you are being accused of all this stuff, yet you're working in the arena of really advocating and protecting children yourself now. And your employers have no problem with you whatsoever, from my understanding, I think, right? So
yeah. So, I've had, and anytime I speak publicly, I always have to give the disclaimer of, I'm not here to speak as a representative of the department.
Right.
I'm here only to speak about what has happened to me and my children, and those violations. But my employer is very well aware of everything that has happened. I'm still employed by them. And, had I been found unfit, truly, I would not be employed by them. I supervise parents with their children, but yet with my own children, it requires a professional supervisor. So it's almost like the state of Oklahoma entrusts me um, to be able to supervise parents. And at the same time, the state of Oklahoma says, you have to be supervised. And
But
so
the Supreme Court is kicking a lot of this back for you. I think today was the ruling, and so we have found this here. Tell everybody where they can find your website and your social, so that they can go there. And I'll put the links in the description. Where do you most want people to follow and support you?
Okay. Well, and I gotta say, like, these were created by advocates, and I'm very lucky to have people who, I mean, whenever I was in jail, people were fundraising, people were trying to do whatever they could do, right? And so there's a website called justiceforrosario.com, and that's the number 4. And there's also a social media page that was created by someone else. I don't run that, but it was created by someone else. And it's also Justice, the number 4, Rosario. We have about 1,500 followers, and, very active followers. And then we have a lot more who, don't like or follow, but 90 something, I don't know, one of the administrators told me, but over 90% of most of the traffic is actually not the followers. And so my case is very well known. Attorneys know about it, paralegals know about it. And I get from a lot of attorneys, that they're rooting for me, that they hope that I prevail. But these attorneys are also, they're scared, they can't stand up. It's almost like the Mean Girls Club, where these top tier attorneys are really monopolizing. And so any of these lower attorneys.
You go against the judge who's on the bench, then you get an adverse ruling for no reason whatsoever, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you familiar with this right here?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And this
Yeah.
one here. Yep.
Yep. In April, in April we have, Child Abuse Prevention Month, and then this week is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. And, whenever I mentioned that Marcy's Law was violated by the district attorney and dismissed my ex's domestic assault and battery charges in the presence of minor child to focus on prosecuting me, it's that Crime Victims Week that we're talking about.
Raising awareness. Are you lining up other interviews? Have you done many other interviews recently, or?
I've done a lot of local news interviews. There's a few advocates, I've been very lucky and blessed that, I don't have to really be the one pursuing these interviews. I have advocates who help push and help,
Have they just spotted it in the media and became friendly with you and decided to jump on to help you? Or these friends or former colleagues or?
Some are already friends, but a lot of people have reached out to me in my city, in the state, in the nation. I've had, strangers donate to me that don't know me, but the story just resonated with them. They've gone through the same
Exactly.
victims. And so sadly, it's a common story. But a lot of these people don't have a platform. They're very scared. It's difficult to speak about custody cases. What made it different for me, and what actually I think, made it more of a possibility to be able to have the case be on the news, is the moment that they criminally charged me with child stealing. That actually opened up the door for news outlets to be able to report on the case.
Right, because
That's
you know the ground rules and all this is if it's not yet being litigated or prosecuted, it's very difficult to talk about it without somebody threatening you with a lawsuit or to make you held accountable in some way, shape, or form.
yeah.
So
If they would have kept this only a custody case and not made it into a criminal case, it would have not gotten the I don't think it would have gotten local news. It would have been very difficult. I know that some custody cases do end up making local news, but it's, as you said, very, very difficult. So it's almost
is the judge and prosecutor on your case? Excuse me for interrupting, but are they elected or appointed in your area?
um in my criminal child stealing case, I actually got the case moved out of Tulsa County.
Oh, great.
When it comes to the judge. So I have a judge from Creek County. The district attorney is still from Tulsa. I'm hoping to be able to disqualify him because there's a lot of conflict of interest there. Um,
Let me ask you this: is this the same guy? I came across something. We did our research. Mary's really an impressive researcher, and came across something. Was this the same guy that was involved in a situation where his own daughter stabbed him?
yes, that is correct.
What's his name again? I don't have it in front of me.
It's Tulsa District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler.
Okay. Unrelated to your case, and I think he was claiming, there's mental illness going on with her. And and we have respect for the mentally ill. My mother was mentally ill, and we know people that struggle. So that's no reflection on him necessarily, but there's other issues you do have with him, and then the conflict and all that. So we found this on there, Oklahoma's for Change. I guess you have some kind of election or something coming up there real soon, right?
Yeah. So we have Oklahomans Unite for Change, and it is bipartisan. We have an event at the Capitol in Oklahoma, April 30th, starting at 9 a.m. And it's going to be in the morning at the state capitol, and then at the DHS Child Protective Building, which I'm sitting that out as a personally, I just don't think it's appropriate for me to work for them and show up to some sort of event against them whenever, again, my experiences that I share are only mine and my children. And then we're going to be at the Capitol in the afternoon, and all of those are within walking distance. We have legislators from across the aisle speaking. We have senators, we have Republicans, Democrats, some that have gotten recent legislation passed. One of them just got passed and it'll be affected in November that, abusers can't obtain sole custody of children or joint custody. And the language was changed. It used to be domestic violence. Now it's added child abuse. And so sadly that does happen. Oftentimes, people accused of abuse are rewarded sole custody. And so there's quite a few legislations that we're pushing for. The state of Oklahoma is number one worst in the nation for domestic violence.
Wow.
Number two
I
worst.
wouldn't know that as an outsider, never been to Oklahoma. I thought it was a peaceful country of ranchers and beautiful scenery.
Well, I think sadly, a lot of these are happening in private homes, right?
Yeah.
A lot of this abuse is happening, it's hidden. And even when it's not hidden, for some reason, we're really having an issue dealing with it as a state. So, we're number one for domestic violence. We're number two for domestic violence homicides.
Wow.
On Monday, we just had a tragedy of a murder suicide of 5 people in Yukon, Oklahoma. And so, I wouldn't doubt it if we rise to the top number one on domestic violence homicides. We're top worst in the nation for child abuse.
And part of the problem is not only, that there's something wrong with how probably the kids are being raised about not to behave that way, but also when they get to the level where your case is at and you can influence, peddle, or forum shop and pick out your judge and pick out your, and have these people in there who are friends with the people that are being paid to go against you, you have no chance at justice. There's no fairness. And with somebody who's articulate and like you are, can put together a good argument, and you have a good support system, they're probably shaking in their boots. And, you know, we applaud people like you because we've tried to stand up for people and we've been targeted hardcore for trying to stand up for others, and you're standing up for yourself and against very powerful people. So we have other people on the show that do the same thing, and it's always a battle getting to the truth and getting the truth out, but eventually it comes out. Tell us real quickly, we're going to have to wrap this up here soon. Where are we at now? You got a good ruling that has the Supreme Court of Oklahoma, which, as you can see, I put it as my background. Mary put that up there. She helps me with all the technical stuff because I've been in prison so long. But so she helps me with all this. And so I've written some books on crime victim advocacy also. I knew Ghislaine Maxwell before she was infamous. That's my book on her. And then I knew briefly Robert Durst for a while. So I wrote this book exposing him for what he really was, and explaining things in here that he denied for 40 years until he went to trial 2 years ago in California, and he finally admitted them. Everybody's like, "You're going to get sued. You're going to get sued." And then finally he admitted them on the stand. He got caught in his lies, and he told some truths. So you get a lot of retaliation for trying to do the right thing. And Mary and I have been through it. She's been through it out in Fresno. We've been through it all over the place, falsely accused. So we understand the battle. What's happening with this order? What do you want to happen next? And tell us anything else you want to say to close this out.
Yeah. So I did a writ of mandamus with the Supreme Court to disqualify the judge. I was being denied court transcripts, and these are court transcripts that was during the time of this alleged child stealing crime. And so I argued, how can I be criminally prosecuted, but yet this evidence is being hidden? And whenever you are a party to the case, you're supposed to be able to get court transcripts. No ifs, ands, buts. There's no law against it. You have the right to due process and defend your own case, and you can't do it without court transcripts that you might
Probably
need.
be entitled to a fee waiver if you're saying that I'm indigent and I just can't afford them.
Yeah, but I've been blessed with supporters who I didn't ask for them to be paid. I just wanted the transcripts, and so I was being denied the transcripts. And there was an emergency regarding, my youngest that, during supervised visits, he was saying that he wanted to kill himself, not live anymore, wanted to go to heaven. And this is my little 6-year-old. And so I filed for an emergency to have therapy put in place. And it has gone unheard.
Again, for YouTube, this is part of the public record in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The allegations she's making, and this is her story, and so we're just reporting it, basically from her personal experience and from the public record that's already been entered into the public record.
Yeah. And so, but even I was told that the recent filings at the Oklahoma Supreme Court, they're public record. So the judge was not removed, which, I still have the option to file a rehearing within 20 days. He was not removed. However, the Oklahoma Supreme Court did issue a writ of mandamus ordering the court to vacate all the court orders that they issued while they were under disqualification. Now, to me, the law is clear. It's Miller Dollar Hyde versus Tal in Oklahoma, that if you are under disqualification and you rule on anything, it causes an error that really cannot be undone. And that's what this judge did. During this disqualification, he vacated he didn't vacate, he issued court orders.
Mm-hmm.
He started to issue court orders regarding the court transcripts that he had denied me, delayed. He started, issuing court orders, and I don't know if to appear to correct his error before the Supreme Court.
So
but
did they have the option also to remove him so you wouldn't even have to go back to him? Or now they're forcing you to go back before this guy and deal with the same guy?
I really think the law is, and it's clear that they should have disqualified him, and they didn't for some reason. I don't know if it's because I'm a pro se litigant and I'm going up against three of the toughest attorneys.
It almost sounds like they might be giving him a chance to do the right thing and get off it himself, rather than humiliating him and saying, "Get off this case. Enough is enough already."
Yeah, yeah. So, and then opposing counsel, the guardian asked for sanctions, for me to be sanctioned, and the Supreme Court denied that. And
Good.
so, I'm very thankful for that. But I don't think it was an appropriate motion. I'm just trying to fight to recover my children and to have the evidence heard. We didn't have a show cause hearing in my children's guardianship. It was a default guardianship. There wasn't a court hearing that deemed me unfit, no actual evidence hearing. And the allegations against me are not true. They, claim I'm mentally unstable, but I have a psych evaluation and a follow-up that confirmed that I am not. I have a therapist. There's no evidence of it. And
I've read some of your pleadings. They seem better written than most attorneys, so I'm sure you're highly competent. We're going to have to wrap this up. We can follow up with a part 2. I know one of your advocates wants to come on as well, and we're going to have her on probably in the next few days. Stay in touch with us. Keep tabs. For my fans, please follow. Go to the links in the description. Support her in the effort to get her children back and to have some justice in this case. It's never easy when people are getting divorced and there's children involved to begin with, let alone with all the accusations flying around here. And we're going to bring this back. And I ask your fans and your supporters to support my work, and please subscribe to my channel. And also, we have a very, very important case we're covering. Look at the videos on David Michael Reinhardt. Man got 53 years in California for trying to recover his inheritance. Was set up, first man in history to shoot and kill a police robot in Fresno. Okay, all he wanted was an FBI investigation. They denied him that. They tried to cover up their corruption. They offered him time served. He said no. He said he just had to deny his right to his inheritance and say that he was delusional. He said, no, I'm not delusional. I had the trust agreement. I'm owed these tens of millions of dollars. My sister and all these other people allegedly stolen from me. And I want the FBI to investigate who altered this trust agreement. Bottom line, they went in on him with, SWAT team and this robot. They offered him time served for shooting and killing a police robot. He turned it down, went to trial. They gave him 53 years. And then a few weeks ago, he's been in over 20, I think 27 years now. They just offered him, they turned down his parole in California and denied him 15 more years before his next parole hearing. This is a guy they offered time served to. So we ask you to please get behind myself and Mary and support David Michael Reinhardt. Please add some comments to his thing. I can put his address up there if people want to contact him, and we'll do the same for you. We'll try to everybody help each other on these pressing matters. And I want to thank you for coming on. Now, just real quickly, if you could sum it up, if today was your last day on earth, how do you want to be remembered to your community and to your children? I try to remember to ask that of all my guests.
I just want my children to know that I love them, that I believe them, and that I will always fight for them, and that they are believed and they are worthy. And, I do think that bad things happen so that good things can happen. So I still have faith, and, just fight with everything that you have. It's very difficult every day, but I think, if you just get up every day and just try, it's really all you can do.
There you go. So we'll put that up there. And then we're going to close out possibly with this one. It's dangerous to be right in matters about which the established authorities are wrong. We found that on your website. And there's a quote I put in all my books. I have another one coming out tomorrow. All that's needed for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That's from Edmund Burke. And we stand by that. We live by that. And we try to stand up for others. Thank you so much for joining. And it was a pleasure meeting you. And we keep you in our thoughts and prayers for this battle that you're going through.
Thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing. I mean, it's invaluable, and it's definitely needed because people need a platform. So thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. Good night.
Thank you.